Want to welcome everybody back for our Tuesday keynote session. We will be hearing shortly from Bern Szukalski. First of all, I'm going to let Scott Dickerson acknowledge our sponsors. Scott, sir, the microphone is yours.
All righty, good afternoon, everybody. I hope everyone had a good lunch. Again, I'd like to take a couple minutes to thank all of our conference sponsors and also the organizations that helped put on yesterday's workshops. Takes an enormous amount of support and effort to put on the Kentucky GIS conference every year. And CAMP is truly indebted to our sponsors for their incredible generosity and continued support. As I said earlier this morning, there's absolutely no way that we could put on this conference without them, and I cannot stress enough how important they all are to CAMP or how much they are valued. This afternoon's sponsor is Esri. Esri is a small mom and pop GIS shop that sits in the foothills of the San Bernardino Mountains, just over the hill from Palm Springs. But in all seriousness, they established in 1969. They're the global leader in GIS software. There's not a one of us in the GIS profession that has not seen or used the SRI software and data to some extent. We all know them, and any introduction that I could give could not cover the reach of their influence across the world of GIS. They have long been a supporter of CAMP, and many of our friends from Esri have been CAMP members over the years. We thank Esri for their continued support to our organization, and I will get out of the way so that they can get on with their presentation.
Thank you, Scott. And I just want to say a few words about our speaker. Bern Szukalski has a Kentucky connection. After he received his Bachelor of Science in Biological Sciences with a chemistry minor, he spent a little while at Western Kentucky University doing some grad study in karst hydrology and geology. So I am obviously, as a geologist, a big fan. Spent a little bit of time doing environmental work and then ended up at that little software company. We hope one of these days they can get their feet under them and really get going. Soon, I'm sure, right? But Bern has, for 35 years, worked with Esri as a project manager and now as a corporate technology evangelist. If I could get a job title like that, I think I would be in a good place. Going to let Bern take it from here. Give him as much time as possible to communicate what he's hoping to communicate. So, Bern, the floor is yours.
Okay, thanks everybody. It's great to be here. I know you're there, and here for me right now is I'm in the middle of the Geo Experience Center at our corporate headquarters in Redlands, and it's interesting to be back. This is probably only my 6th time in the office in the last year and a half, so it's always a little bit strange coming back, but it's always very, very good, and hopefully next time we'll be able to meet in person instead of virtually. So I'd like to keep things a little light and lively here this morning and talk a little bit about mapping the future of GIS and take us on a little bit of a geographic journey using maps. Now, I've always felt that there was something about a map, and I fell in love with maps a long, long time ago. And the first map I fell in love with is this one here. It's just a USGS topo map, and I used to go down to the local sporting goods store and I'd pick these up and use them for lots of great adventures. And it was really fascinating to me to study a map and see what's over the next hill, look at all the place names and things like that. So maps have always had a fascination for me, and I attribute my 35 years at Esri to a USGS topo map invariably. Now, maps, of course, have been around for a very, very long time, for as long as man's been able to scratch with one rock upon another. And that map up there on the right-hand side is the Babylonian map, which is considered among the very first recorded maps. So, of course, a very simple map, but still capturing place. Now, the ancient Greeks actually are credited in some ways with inventing geography. and Ptolemy and Eratosthenes. They were the ancient Greek geographers that believed that the world was round and actually discovered ways to depict the world on a flat piece of paper, on a flat map. So we can also credit them, I suppose, with inventing projections. Now, I've been a caver for a long time, since my college days back in Pennsylvania, and cave maps always fascinated me. Of course, back in those days, cave maps were done with an ink pen set and drawn using paper on graph paper first and then transcribed to something else. So certainly they've evolved. And during my college years at Esri, I also discovered and enjoyed different kinds of maps, maps that taught me about the internal organisms, organelles of simple creatures, and maps that taught me about biological life cycles. So maps have always been amazing to me, and they're just understandable and they're shareable, and also they're simple. Now, somebody once said a stone is simple, but yet craftsmen with the right tools can create works of art from stones. And indeed, as GIS people, GIS maps are our works of art. They capture our knowledge, they capture our skills, and they capture our trade craft. So they represent kind of a visual language that we can use to do what we do and share it with others and help others understand the same things that we're realizing. Now, maps, of course, are the building blocks of GIS, and they always have been. This is a page out of the early documentation for ArcInfo, all caps with a slash in the middle. That was the first product that I began working with when I started at Esri, when it truly was more like a ma and pa GIS shop. There were about 100 people when I started here at Esri. And that was what the early documentation looked like. And I recognized the handwriting in the diagram there. The diagrams and the handwriting were done by Scott Morehouse, who was one of the early developers of ArcInfo. And he was also the director of software development for many, many years, and is still contributing to Esri. Now, even back then, maps were recognized as an essential building block. So it was clearly recognized that we apply GIS using maps, and a map is the basic unit of information in a GIS, and a user works with GIS by applying processes to maps. So maps have always been a very key element of what we do. Of course, maps were much simpler back then. I plotted many of a map on the CalComp plotter. I did some on Mylar. And this map here is circa 1984, and this is generally attributed as one of the early maps that ever came out of the ArcInfo system done with ArcPlot. On the left are some challenges for GIS. I started off doing functional benchmarks. So before acquiring our software, people would put our software to the test, and I was part of the team that demonstrated our abilities to meet the challenges. And back then, the challenges were pretty simple. As you can see, a lot of it centered around plotting, even plotting on Mylar, using attribute values to shade certain parts of a map and so forth. So back in the day, we actually didn't really expect a lot out of a GIS, but today, of course, things have changed quite a bit. As maps have grown, as technology behind it has grown and advanced, we certainly expect a lot more out of maps than we ever did in the past. And looking forward, we will continue to expand what we expect and what we get out of our GIS systems. Everything from fighting climate to racial equity to looking at affordable housing to evolving transportation and clean energy. These are all things, all questions that we now pose to a modern GIS system. So throughout everything, geography, of course, is the foundation for our maps. And we think of this geography-based approach as the geographic approach. And that's how we approach the where, the why, and the how. So it's how we solve problems and we discover answers. Now, as GIS professionals, we think a lot about maps, but oftentimes just thinking that something is so or thinking that something is correct isn't enough. We need to turn those I thinks into the I knows, or the I know whys, or even more importantly, we need to take it up to the next level. So we apply GIS through maps to create understanding, geographic understanding, and GIS turns geography into something more meaningful, and that's true understanding of the where, why, and how things are happening. Maps are used in many, many ways today. They help support analysis and understanding, and there's some very fine examples of applying GIS technology to understand things about our communities and about our planet. And it represents the proof of where, why, and how things happen. Maps have also evolved to support departmental tasks and workflows and field workforces. So maps are also used to enable others to accomplish the work and gain the understanding that they need. Maps also are used to support decisions and operational awareness, whether we're tackling COVID or whether we're dealing with storms or other events, other catastrophes, fires and such. Maps help decision makers and many others gain an understanding of what's happening right now. Maps also support 3D, so I think a lot of us are involved in working in visualizing how things that we change within our cityscapes and our landscapes might impact how things appear. So we use 3D a lot to analyze that. A lot of the initial analysis with 3D was visual. We could look at things and see change, and we still do a lot of visual analysis, but increasingly 3D has grown into more than just visual analysis, but actual analysis that helps us understand things in the third dimension. Now, often we talk about capturing a digital twin, and I remember some years ago when the notion of a digital twin seemed to emerge as something new, but I've realized that for as long as we've been practicing GIS, we have created digital twins. We capture a virtual model of our physical world, whether we're environmentalists or whether we're city planners. We capture that and we try to include many of the processes and systems within that digital twin. These days, we can use multiple sources of input to make that more real, the Internet of Things and real-time sensors. And our goal here is to be able to look at our world and not only understand why things are the way they are, but also to look forward. Early on, when we created digital twins, we did them using very simple things, points and lines and polygons. And while the importance of these simple things hasn't gone away, we've certainly expanded our data models to capture other things like parcel fabrics or utility networks or vehicle tracking systems, tracking events, and so forth. So we've grown the data model to better able to capture a true digital twin. And on top of that, we've incorporated business systems and live feeds, the Internet of Things and sensors. So all of these have come together to enable us to create a really remarkable digital twin of what we need to capture, which helps us do our planning, helps us do our work, and helps us understand what's going on. Now, clearly, ArcGIS has evolved quite a bit during my time and during your time, and that process just is continual. It just never ends. And a lot of the advances in GIS are directly based upon technology advances. So new machinery, new types of information coming on board, new architectures, the advent of AI and machine learning. These are all things which we've folded into our evolution of GIS software. Another thing that's happened is that organizations have fundamentally changed. GIS organizations certainly have fundamentally changed, and our GIS software has grown to adapt and accommodate those changes, incorporating the way people want to organize themselves, the way people want to collaborate, and the way people want to work with the data that they have. So all of this has driven lots of innovation, but in my mind, the biggest thing that's happened during my entire career at Esri, and that has made the largest influence on GIS, is the introduction of web or cloud-based GIS. Now, at one point in time, this seemed like it was a sudden event, but it really isn't. It's an evolving event, and I've gone back here and captured some of my old slides going back to 2005 when we were first beginning to think about taking our software and rolling it over into this new WebGIS pattern. And by WebGIS, I don't mean the World Wide Web necessarily. This is a services-based GIS, which enables us to do many amazing things easily now that we were never able to do in the past. So WebGIS has certainly been evolutionary, but yet it's been actually revolutionary in what it offers and what it empowers us to do. And one of those things is to create what we like to think of as a geospatial infrastructure. And that's kind of an odd word, I think, in many ways. I just think of this as a framework for helping us succeed at what we need to do. One of the key elements of geospatial infrastructure these days is a portal. It's your organization, your homepage. It's a place where people come and they sign in, they have identity, it provides them access to tools, it defines roles, and it provides capabilities to do work. Underneath that is all of the content, the services, the authoritative services and data that you hold there. This becomes your system of record, and this portal provides ways that you can share and enable others to access that data. Also, what this geospatial infrastructure does is it empowers others to apply GIS through analysis and modeling to gain understanding, and this we think of as a system of insight. But perhaps the most important part is that it also provides many ways for us to share what we do, amplify our work, and collaborate with others. Now, how these things are formed, how they come together is unique because every organization is unique. All the people within organizations are unique. So this is a very dynamic framework which can be adapted to however your organization works. It's also interesting that these support what we think of as the modern implementation pattern. Years ago, we introduced ArcGIS Online as sort of the first web or service or cloud-based GIS. And I remember people were puzzled about this. At conferences, people would say, now tell me, Bern, why is Esri telling me I need to put my data in the cloud? And we weren't really saying that. We were thinking of the cloud as an extension towards what everybody worked with and used every day, ArcGIS Desktop. And of course, you could register your services in ArcGIS Online and begin making maps and sharing those with others easily. And that was something that was difficult to do in the past. After that came ArcGIS Enterprise, which is the on-premises implementation for WebGIS. And the reasons for that are multiple, but a lot of it involves the need to integrate business systems or the need to integrate or take advantage of advanced technologies and capabilities like developing parcel fabrics and utility networks. In the past, there were many people that did one or the other, ArcGIS Online only or ArcGIS Enterprise, but the pattern that we see today is actually a combination of both, leveraging both of these worlds together to get the best out of each. So one of the advantages of the online environment is that it can take advantage of dynamic scaling, the elasticity of the web. And a lot of organizations take what they want to publish out publicly and they put that in their online part of their geospatial infrastructure to take advantage of those capabilities. In addition, more recently, we've been evolving the ways that organizations can connect through something we call collaborations. And these continue to evolve and advance, but essentially what you do is you create a trusted relationship with another organization. If you're in the state, it could be trusted relationships with cities within your states. If you're an environmental organization, it could be trusted relationships with people elsewhere that are doing environmental work. So these relationships, these collaborations are also very, very important, and they expand what we do with our ArcGIS Online or ArcGIS Enterprise organizations. Now, one of the great advantages to web maps is that they can integrate all types of data, and they apply a layer of abstraction to a lot of the data that we used to have to become intimately familiar with, and that's the power of layers. So one of the difficulties of working in GIS is that there's so many different types of data that we have to deal with and work with. And in a web GIS, we can turn those into layers, which can be easily mashed up and brought into maps, which has empowered a lot of self-service mapping activities because you don't need to think about the the intricacies or the vagaries of all the different data types. You can just take layers and assemble them together into maps. Now, web map is one of the most powerful parts of any GIS these days. And at Esri, a web map is more than a map in the browser. It's actually a functional specification which works across the entire ArcGIS system. So this is how things work together. You can author a map once and use it in ArcGIS desktop. You can use it to build stories. You can use it in dashboards using ArcGIS dashboards. You can use what we call instant apps and other app builders to create powerful applications. And you can also take these out in the field, even in disconnected mode. And that is the power of maps. They are the lingua franca of a modern GIS system. Now, over the years, we've created some really interesting ways to help you create expressive maps. So you want these to reach your audience and have impact. Today, we essentially have three great ways that you can author maps. We have the new map viewer. We have what we call now Map Viewer Classic. And of course, you can make 3D maps using Scene Viewer. The new map viewer introduces some amazing new capabilities in terms of effects and blending that can be applied to your layers. Now, all of these sit on top of a substrate of vector-based maps, which we encourage everyone to embrace. We're sort of in a transition here between the tile image-based maps and vector-based maps, but vector-based maps have been around for a very long time. They're quicker, they're customizable, they're easily packaged for offline use. So these are definitely the way to go moving forward in the future. On top of that, we've created interesting ways that you can create information displays, pop-ups as we call them. And we've invented Arcade, which is an expression language, which lets you do some really interesting things by adding color or changing formatting of attributes within those pop-ups. And recently, in fact, just earlier this week, we took charting out of beta in Map Viewer, and we also added line charts to that. So the ability to manage and look at data as charts is also fairly new and also empowers us to do a whole lot more. Now, these days, we don't think of a map as just a map. We think of a map as the map, and we've finally crafted that using our best tradecraft, but it's also about the tools that are around the map that help people get the information that they want or use it in the ways that they want. We've been evolving the concept of what we call instant apps. These are configurable apps which can guide you through the process of creating an application very, very simply and very, very easily. And anybody can do these. It's a few clicks of a button to make these. We also have app builders. So Web App Builder is one of the most popular right now. Lots of people use it. There's no customization, no coding required. You just configure widgets and add them to a map. And the one-day successor to that will be Experience Builder, which is evolving rapidly. And that's a way to create not just applications, but also kind of page-based experience that can be used to incorporate your maps that you make and share them with others. ArcGIS dashboards are also popular and powerful and an easy way to take the maps and the data behind it and represent that using infographics. And story maps have been around for decades now, but they've also been evolving quite a bit. We used to have separate story map builders, and now we've sort of brought them all into one building environment. And these are the new ArcGIS story maps, which are a powerful way to amplify your work by making it shareable with others, especially the public or educators and students.
Hey everyone, Nicole Graham's here from Esri St. Louis. We wanted to show you some of the coolest and newest features in ArcGIS Online Map Viewer. And we were looking for an interesting and intellectual topic when we thought, oh duh, it's Kentucky, bourbon. Specifically, as more Americans are traveling domestically again, and the tourism surrounding Kentucky's distilleries begins to rebound, we wondered, who is most likely to be visiting Kentucky for bourbon? According to this Market Watch article from 2017, there's actually a very specific demographic visiting the Bourbon Trail. They are out-of-state visitors who are generally between 25 and 54 years of age, with household incomes between $75,000 and $100,000. Luckily, the Living Atlas contains and maintains demographic data that is from the Census and American Community Survey data. For example, this popular demographics in the United States layer from the Living Atlas contains a whole bunch of fields, everything from age and ethnicity to household incomes and more. I'm using it in my map, symbolized by a custom expression I created using Arcade called urban age. This expression adds up the number of people in each 5-year age group and divides by the total population to calculate the percent. I'm also using smart mappings above theme to emphasize counties that are higher than the national average in their proportion of urban age residents. In my next map, I use that very same Living Atlas layer, but this time symbolized by an expression I created for the percentage of households in each county that make between $75,000 and $100,000. I can use that same Arcade expression here and mix and match contents in my pop-up to create something compelling that really tells a narrative about this particular county. Speaking of compelling, have you checked out the Living Atlas base maps that are available? It's so easy to change the vibe of your whole map just by choosing a different base map. When I add both variables and choose the color and size symbology, I begin to notice a few things. It looks like suburban counties have darker colored circles. In other words, higher proportions of their residents are in that sweet spot for bourbon-loving age. They also tend to have larger circles, meaning more households have an income of $75,000 to $100,000. I want to dig a little deeper, so I enriched my county data with 2 variables. The percent of people who have consumed bourbon in the past 6 months and the average amount spent on alcohol while traveling in 2021. Yes, these are real things you can search for in ArcGIS Online. Right now, I have a binary symbology going on, where counties that exceed 10% of people having consumed bourbon and spending on average over $100 on vacation drinks are brown, and all the others have no fill. But what if I replace this binary symbology with my 2 spending parameters and choose the relationship symbology instead? Now we're seeing counties in brown. Higher proportions of these counties have consumed bourbon in the past 6 months, and they're also high on their spending on vacation-related drinks. Whereas counties in orange are still more likely to have consumed bourbon in the past 6 months, but they're relatively low on their trip-related drink spending. So in other words, they might just be enjoying that Kentucky bourbon in the comfort of their own home. One of my favorite new features to the latest update to the map viewer is this effect, where I can add a drop shadow or some of these other neat filters to make my data really pop. Finally, it's easy to go from map to app by launching an instant app. I can go right into an express or full setup of any of these templates and publish it to share with others. Now, what fun would this academic analysis be if I kept it all to myself? Whether I'm a market researcher, economic analyst, or just a curious GIS practitioner who loves bourbon, one of the best ways to amplify my work is to share it in a story map. I hope you'll go forth and explore the Living Atlas and new map viewer capabilities on your own soon. Cheers!
All right, thanks, Nicole. I apologize, I didn't set up Nicole Graham's well that time, but I think many of you know Nicole. She used to spend a lot of time in Kentucky. She's in our St. Louis office, and she appears here virtually and gave us a really beautiful tour through the Living Atlas and leveraging some of the new capabilities in the map viewer, like styles, which are very powerful, and blending and effects. So thanks, Nicole, for preparing that for us. Now, Nicole did build that map using Living Atlas, and back when I first started, data wasn't available. There was no ArcGIS online. There wasn't readily available digital data, and I actually spent the first 2 weeks of my career in front of a digitizing tablet, digitizing data, automating it from paper maps. But things obviously are quite a lot different. And the Living Atlas is really a pretty amazing repository of content. It's ready to use content that comes from Esri and the global GIS community. And it's a living atlas because things change all the time. And indeed, some of what's published there are live feeds. Now, there is a Living Atlas website, which I encourage everyone to visit, and you can actually sign in at that website and use it as a place to start to do your work. You can go to the Browse tab and you can search for things of interest, and when you find them, you can favorite them, or you can share them directly into groups for later use, or you can even begin creating your web maps directly from here. And I wanted to acknowledge that there is quite a bit of content which is useful for anybody that's working in the state of Kentucky. And we encourage you to contribute as well. We have a program called the Living Atlas Community, and that allows anybody to contribute additional details. So you can actually digitize through one of our apps and add some details. Many universities are taking advantage of this and adding a high level of detail through their, by digitizing their universities, and many other folks are involved in this as well. We also have a way for you to contribute your imagery to our world imagery base maps. And this is a very popular way for you to make the imagery that you acquire more useful for others in the greater GIS community. There's also Living Atlas apps, and some of these I think are definitely going to be of interest to you. There's Air Quality Aware, there's Hurricane Aware, there's something called Wayback, which actually is an archive, a browsable archive of all of our world imagery through the years. It goes back about 6 years right now and continues to evolve. We've just added some capabilities not only for swipe, but also for playing back things that you see on your map. And there's lots of other interesting applications that you can explore. Another one I'd like to highlight is Esri Maps for Public Policy. So especially when we're thinking about equity and injustice and things like that, many of these maps that are part of Esri Maps for Public Policy will help you gain understanding of what's happening in your community and help you get some action, maybe get some forward thinking about what's going on there. Another part of the Living Atlas is actually focused on ArcGIS Pro. So this isn't all about the web. For ArcGIS Pro, the users, of course, there's ready-to-use base maps and layers, but there's also layers that are designed specifically for analysis. There's also live feeds that you can bring into your Pro environment. And lately, we've been focused on adding some other things that can be downloaded and leveraged in the Pro environment, things like deep learning packages, raster function templates, and rule packages, and more. And what I'd like to do is turn things virtually back to Nicole to give us a tour of how these might be used in ArcGIS Pro.
Hey everyone, nod your head if you agree with this statement. The hardest part of every project is wrangling the data. If you like getting time back in your calendar, I'm going to show you 2 ways to use Living Atlas in ArcGIS Pro to save you valuable time and impress your colleagues. One of the most common misconceptions I hear about using data from the Living Atlas is that it can't be used in analysis. I'm going to use a global data set from the UN's Environment Program to conduct a biomass study on Kentucky's Huckton watersheds to dispel that myth. In my map, I do have one locally stored layer. It's my Huckton watersheds that are stored in the file geodatabase. Meanwhile, My global biomass layer is a raster that is measuring carbon by tons per hectare, and it's coming from a server in Cambridge, England. I've built a model that uses these two layers as inputs into the zonal statistics and table tool. What I want to do here is find out the total amount of available carbon by summarizing all of the pixels that fall within every watershed. So the zonal statistics and table tool will execute that process first, then it'll join the resulting table back to my original watershed boundary layer. Now, when I select one of my watersheds, it has this additional field called sum, and I can use that to symbolize my watershed boundaries. Let's do a graduated color scheme on the sum field and choose something green and maybe increase the number of classes to 10. And as we'd expect, the watersheds with the highest available biomass are generally overlapping with these national forest areas. Thanks to the Living Atlas, I just leveraged data sitting on a server in England to gain insight about my local area. How cool is that? Another misconception about the Living Atlas is that it only contains data, but this couldn't be further from the truth. Next, I want to show you how to use the Living Atlas deep learning package to extract building footprints from this 6-inch image service from KY from above. Let's imagine that this is an area of new construction, and I need to digitize these building footprints and add them to my county-wide layer. I can do so using the image analyst extension to detect objects using deep learning tool. I'll specify my 6-inch raster, give it an output name, and now I can search directly from Pro into the Living Atlas to find the deep learning package that I need that will specify the parameters of my model. So I'm going to choose building footprint, but there's a whole list of options, everything from detecting cars and trees to pools and even shipwrecks. Now, the arguments of the model are populated, and in the interest of time, I'll just show you the output. First, it creates these inference buildings, which if we zoom in a bit closer, you can see are kind of soft and squishy. But that's okay. I can use the regularized building footprint tool to specify my inference building and derive some harder angles so that they look more like a typical building footprint. Using that pre-trained deep learning model from the Living Atlas made a complex workflow like object detection super duper easy. So whether you're a state agency, local government, researcher, or private entity, the Living Atlas has something to make your job easier. So stop wrangling data if you don't need to, and spend that newfound time on analysis instead.
All right, another great demonstration from Nicole, and I thank her very much for that. And as you can see, the Living Atlas it's not just for web mapping, it's for professional GIS users as well. And I think she demonstrated a couple of very powerful ways that the Living Atlas can be leveraged to do complicated analysis. And it's really amazing how quickly that can be brought together. So now we have all these maps, we have all these great apps. Yet another challenge that WebGIS provides us or presents us with is how do we organize that so others can find it? And I think about organizing these into various destinations. Your organization home is definitely one of those destinations, and we've added some additional tools that help you customize it both for the anonymous visitor, the public visitor, as well as for members of your organization. But beyond that, there are things like hubs. The basic hubs and also Hub Premium for engaging community, as well as open data. So these are also very important destinations that help you reach out to and connect with a specific audience. And on top of that, I think of other things that might represent what I think of as mini destinations. So there's something new called story map collections, and they don't necessarily have to contain just story maps. They can contain anything, but these are kind of a nice portfolio of applications that you can bring together and share easily. Speaking of portfolio, that's one of our newer instant apps, and it lets you assemble things with a ribbon along the bottom that makes it easy to explore the maps that you've collected there. And besides that, there's a series of group-based gallery apps. So when you organize content into groups, you can, just like you configure an instant app for a web map, you can configure these group-based gallery apps to present whatever you've managed to bring into your groups in effective and searchable ways. So this is another part of what we need to think about in terms of being mapping and GIS professionals these days. Now, I'd like to acknowledge the work of many of the organizations throughout Kentucky. I don't have time to really go into detail about these contributors, but your work is recognized and appreciated, and I know that there's many more throughout the state of Kentucky that are not specifically recognized here. But we do applaud your work, and you are leading the way in innovation and creativity throughout the state. Now, it's time for a little bit of innovation and creativity because we have lots of challenges to think about. There's severe weather, there's flooding, there's hazardous waste, there's economic issues, there's climate. All of these things pose serious threats and problems for us, but the power of maps can drive understanding and communication and action. My high school biology teacher who got me excited enough about biology to decide to major it in college, he used to say science will save us. And what I think is that the science of where can also save us and help us deal with all these issues, these hard problems that we need to solve. So in closing, what I'd like to do is I'd like to encourage you to amplify your tradecraft, your work, and your knowledge through the power of maps. The GIS landscape is continually evolving, and I would like to ask you to think, not just imagining the possibilities, but to think beyond that and reimagine what's possible given the evolution of mapping and GIS. And with that, I'd like to say thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to all of you continuing to make a difference using the power of maps and GIS. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Bern. There's Drew. Looks like I'm sharing my screen now. That was fantastic. Drew, you want to take it away?
Yeah, getting a lot of background noise here because of my construction work in the next room. So if it gets loud again, I'm going to have to defer back to McKinney. But Bern, thank you very, very much.
You are muted if you didn't know.
No, I'm not. I should be good.
You're good. Good.
Okay. Yeah, I was just saying, thank you, Bern. Appreciate that presentation very much. We're still in my shop. We're still exploring all the different depths of ArcOnline and Living Atlas and all the different tools that are available. And so we very much appreciate that overview. One question that I saw come in or comment is about the bourbon consumption data, and just kind of curious about why St. Louis doesn't follow the trends of other urban cities in the Midwestern area. Speculating whether it might be related to demographics or could it be more economic with the legacy of Anheuser-Busch having a footprint there. But I think that's an interesting question, definitely worth exploring. If anybody has insight on that, chime in here for a minute. Okay, otherwise, let's give Bern a big virtual round of applause if we could, please. Thank you very much. We appreciate the crew from Esri for working together to splice that presentation together for us and patch it through. So thank you very, very much. It's always nice to see the tech when it works. And somebody has speculated that we might need to do some more field research to evaluate the bourbon culture in St. Louis. So we may need to do some field work there. So once again, just a summary of a few of our announcements. Be sure to go check out the map gallery at that address, KYGS Map Gallery 2021-Center for GIS hub.arcgis.com. Place your votes. Be sure to come and check out our social tonight at 5:30, doing a mapathon, creating some much needed data for folks. We will have a social tomorrow night at 5 o'clock. We will be a scavenger hunt. Again, much thanks to Ryan and Tricia for putting those socials together. And then we have the camp focus sessions Wednesday morning and Thursday morning, where we will be actively soliciting your feedback. So we would love to hear your thoughts on camp organization, the future of the profession, and also just ideas for the conference. So very much appreciate everybody's participation. It's been nice to see so many people in the sessions thus far. So I just got an update. Mapathon starts at 5 tonight. Typo on my slide. I apologize. And it's going to be wrong on all of them because I copied and pasted. So Mapathon starts at 5. So everything's at 5 tonight, or 5. The socials both start at 5. So don't be late because I would have been. So apologies.
Live update. There we go.
You rock. So I think other than that, I believe that wraps us up for this session a little bit early. Again, thank you to Bern and Esri. Session 3 will start at 2 o'clock, and we appreciate everybody's participation, everybody's cooperation, everybody's patience. Always interesting to navigate the technology, and this group does it very well. So thank you all. And yes, all times are Eastern. That's right. Just to keep it straight, instead of trying to list 2 times and everything get confused. All times that we have listed are Eastern time, just for the sake of consistency. We love everybody over in Central Time. It's not meant to be discriminatory, but just trying to be simple. So thank you all. We have another break until about 2, so you have 40 minutes. Be sure to follow the link from the email you received this morning to head into session 3. And I believe Kenny Ratliff is leading us off on that. So thank you all, and we will talk soon.